Good afternoon, everyone. This is Julianne Grant. Welcome to our Tech Tuesday webinar series. Appreciate you being here today. Sorry for a little bit of a late start. We had some challenges with some logins because of the reschedule. Please know if you have folks that are not able to join today, we are recording this and we'll be posting up on our website with our Tech Tuesday, all the Tech Tuesday recordings, and within a couple of days. So we're really happy to be here today to talk about highlights of Release 28. We have Milan Obradovic, who's going to be walking us through some of the improvements to the reporting and dashboarding. And please put any questions into the questions panel. We'll be happy to answer them at the conclusion of Milan's presentation. Okay, with that, I'm going to hand it over to Milan.
All right, thanks, Julianne, and welcome back, everyone, to Tech Tuesday. Sorry for the delay. We had a kind of misstep when we're planning out the schedule of Aras release. But we're back on track and we're back with Release 28. So without further ado, let's hop into our agenda really quick. So first things first, excuse me, we're going to be taking a look at exactly what's new in Release 28. Kind of giving some spoilers on the agenda, I guess, but following that, we're going to be taking a look at all the new functionality that's been added, which includes dashboards and reporting, the new responsive form designer. Finally got some updates on the event handling framework, which I'll be able to share with you guys, followed by a little live demo of what was added in this release. And then, as always, we'll finish up with some Q&A and some wrap up. So, Innovator 28, what are the big pieces of what is new? So first things first, as Julianne mentioned, improved dashboards and reporting. Those of you that attended ACE may have already kind of seen this coming on the roadmap, but we finally got the new report item type, which is really just built on top of the existing dashboarding framework that Aras has. And also coming alongside that are some new widgets that you can add to your dashboards to really enhance them and make them even more powerful than they already are. Following that, we have the new responsive form designer. Aras forms have been designed the same as long as I've been working with Aras. So we finally got a new UI to create these item forms. And these forms are also going to be able to, hence the name, respond to your window size and the size of your browser window. And then following that, we had a little bit of preview on the event handling framework in the Innovator 27 Tech Tuesday. Got some new information on that, how it's used, and what it is used for. All right, so to start, we have dashboards and reporting. So like I mentioned, first things first, we have the new report item type, which really is relatively simple. It really provides the user an ability to select their specific context item. On that top right, we have a report running about all ECOs. Alongside your context item, you're able to select all the associated properties directly from that item type. So for example, we have the item number, the title, priority level, the state of all of our Express ECOs listed within that chart. And then what we also have access to are some new dashboard widgets, one being report charts. And that's going to be at the top of our report here. So we have our donut chart, pie charts, column and bar graphs as well. So allows you to really visualize the data that's being captured from these new reports. Alongside that, the report table widget is also new. This is a little different than the previous report widget, as that was reliant on Aras XSLT reporting. This is now directly tied to the new report item type. That can be seen here in this chart below. I kind of included our old dashboard example here as well, just to highlight that these are not separate from the existing dashboard functionality. If I wanted to, say, enhance this dashboard with a report on all ECOs as well, alongside my tasks and my existing projects, I can easily drop that table, any of these charts, within that dashboard. So that we have the responsive form designer. So this, like I mentioned, is a brand new and enhanced user interface for form design. So gone are the days of dragging fields and adjusting your coordinates to make sure everything snaps right. Now this is purely reliant on drag and drop. So if I wanted to say drop the item number for my part form, I could click it, drag it over, drop it into the new editor, which I'll show you guys in a bit, and it will snap right there. So these are all, and that snapping is really powered by specific containers that you can set up yourself. So if you wanted to have a form with 4 columns of fields, you can set that up and modify that as you go down each row. So alongside that, relative to that, or the reason why it's called responsive forms is because these forms are going to resize to use all of the space within the browser window. So the current form editor, you're kind of stuck to however you set it up. With the new form editor, if I full screen my window, all of those fields will expand fully across the screen and really make use of all the screen space we have available to us. So one thing to note here is, although we have this new form editing capability, you still have the ability to use the previous method of form creation. There's a few things that are on the roadmap that aren't currently within the responsive form designer, such as X class, X properties. Those will be added in future releases. So if you are making use of those, you'll probably still want to stick to the classic form editor. However, if you need to find the new responsive editor, no worries, they're both stored within the same space. You'll go to that form item, and there's a new button at the top to access the new editor. So I just wanted to add a nice big screenshot for this, just because I'm going to try to replicate this later. But this is what the new responsive forms look like. Not super apparent how it looks within Aras. I kind of just screenshotted the form, but you have the ability to group categories or group fields based off specific categories. Couldn't come up with great names for these, so my apologies, but the core info of our part is the name and part number. We have a deeper breakdown, it's our revision and type, and then other metadata as needed. So alongside that, we have the event handling framework. As I mentioned earlier, this was added in release 27, but Aras was still working out really the crux of the documentation, so we had to kind of wait to get more information on this. But really what the event handling framework does is it adds the capability to publish Innovator event data to external systems. So what do we mean by event data? So these events are really these common item type events like on after add, on after update, on after copy, delete, any of those item events. And so the event handling framework really relies on 3 main components. So one being event types. So these event types are essentially listeners for those common item type events. So like I mentioned, on after add. The event handlers really contain the configuration settings on how those events will be processed. And then finally, we have subscriptions, which essentially maps those event types to those event handlers and really just define which ones will process which event types. So on our right side of the screen here, we have a couple screenshots. So there could be multiple event types and event handlers within a subscription. Multiple event types can be driven by multiple different event handlers. So as we get more and more information on the event handling framework, we'll look to get more detailed examples on this, but overall, this is the best breakdown I guess I can give at the moment. So without further ado, let's go hop into Aras Innovator and take a look at some of our new functionality. All right, so to begin, I want to start with the new report item. So what we have here is a report on all ECOs. This is the report that we were showing within our screenshots. So within the item form, really all we have to define is the name of our form and the context item, which in this sense is our express ECO. So in order to define what fields we want on our report, so what data we want to pull out, those are defined in this fields relationship here. And essentially all of these fields are going to be some sort of relationship to that express ECO item. So relationship or property. So we have our item type, or item number, title, priority, and so on and so forth. So when we take a look at a report, we also see this count at the bottom of our screen, counts our total number of express ECOs in our environment. That's handled through the aggregation. So what we're going to do is pull all of the item numbers of express ECOs and then make use of the function count to retrieve that entire count. So this report currently doesn't have any filters assigned to it, but essentially what filters will allow us to do is pull out, per se, only express ECOs that are within the in-work state or released, or those with a priority of 2. Really, what the filters are going to do is filter out the data that we're retrieving back from the report. So once we have our report generated, we can go ahead and create a new dashboard that will allow us to kind of visualize the data that is stored within this report. So if we head over to our dashboards, as a reminder, within My Innovator, the new report item is also within My Innovator. So if I head over to the dashboards, see we've got one specifically for all ECOs. Now as we pull this up, we see not only our report chart, the report table that was generated from our report item here, we also have extra widgets available to us as well. And these new widgets are, so these new widgets here that have been added, once again, are the report chart template and report table template. So keep in mind, like I mentioned, there's still the old report template that we saw from the initial releases of the dashboarding functionality. That still exists. If you want to add an XSLT report to your dashboard, you can do that. Then obviously we have our grid and tree grid templates as well, still hanging on. So if I were to go through and kind of make some changes to this dashboard, it works pretty much the same as before. Within each one of these chart widgets, I can actually go ahead and edit them and kind of mess with how this data is being displayed. So currently this ECOs by change coordinator is a column chart. If I really wanted to, I can change to a bar chart, I can change it to pie chart. And really this is more of the, what's the best way of displaying that data? And you can go ahead and make use of all the options available to you. If I really wanted to, I can go ahead and add a new chart widget. In this case, I can go ahead and modify one of ours here just to show how the data will react. And if I really wanted to, I can maybe go ahead and sort by change reason. Probably not the best example of this, but just showing that you can modify each one of these widgets kind of live and modify and receive different data from them. So let's go back to what we initially were displaying because that makes the most sense. Everything on the dashboards, like I mentioned already. So this is obviously not a specific report at all. This is within the dashboarding application. So if I wanted to, I can go ahead and enhance this dashboard by adding a search grid and defining an item type and save search and pulling in all that different data as well. So it's not restrictive to specifically report data. All right. So with that, let's go ahead and move on to kind of the other half of what I wanted to show, and that's going to be the responsive form designer. So I would be safe to assume most of you on the call are aware of how the classic form designer worked, but if not, I'll do a quick review of that just to compare and contrast how these are built. So what we're looking at right now is our classic Aras form. Really nothing special. You guys have seen this one plenty of times, especially on these Tech Tuesday demos. So if we go to our part form item, and if we wanted to make changes to this form, we can go ahead and select the field, modify our positioning based off X and Y coordinates. We can modify the size based off of especially for a text area field. We can modify the size of this field by defining a number of rows and columns, defining how wide it is using the z-index, all of these different settings. And for a new admin, some of these settings could get a little intimidating. There's a lot of relationship fields here. So the goal of what I want to do right now is take our form from a few slides ago and kind of show how quickly we can replicate this. And this is, and really with limited explanation, it's relatively simple to show. So let's get back to Aras and go ahead and note our new button here, which is switch to responsive form. So in this case, we have our form, our default form for our part is currently this classic form. I'm going to go ahead and switch this to responsive form. So we see our new drag and drop editor, relatively similar to the dashboard editor. So to begin, let's go ahead and kind of add some containers for the data that we want to store. And once again, let's go check back on this example that we want to recreate. So it looks like we have 3 columns of information in this top row, 2 columns on the second, and 1 on the bottom. So let's go through and recreate this. So if we want a 3-column set at the top, we can go ahead, drag and drop those elements within there, and start filling in our information. So another thing to note, those kind of groupings that I noted on our slideshow, these are things known as group boxes within the editor. And I'll go ahead and make use of those to kind of create our existing groups. So when I place a group box, I'm able to change the name, label it for the form. So this group box we're going to say is our core part info. And what we want within here is our part name and item number. Put that in and drag that in. So for now, I'm just going to save and close this and refresh our part form. So now we've already got our new core information. And notice, like I mentioned, the form will respond to window size. We have 3 columns in this first row. Notice how this grouping is only taking up that first column. So our next pieces are our further breakdown of item information. So we'll go ahead and add another group box. Rename that. Within here, we'll probably want our classification and our revision. Yep. And what probably also isn't a bad idea, let's go ahead and add the status of our part as well. And then in our third column, we want to add a thumbnail. We can go ahead and drag and drop that within there. As we reload our part, we see our form is starting to get built out here. Let's double check what we had on our example here. So we have a couple more fields to add: our created by ID, managed by ID, and our overall description. So let's finish off our form and go from there. So we'll add our created by. My mistake. So in this case, we wanted to have 2 columns on our second row here. So let's go ahead and add our 2-column set. Our created by, our managed by, and our description field. So if I wanted to, I could go ahead and actually modify the distribution of each column. So if I wanted this thumbnail to take up more of my screen, I can modify the ratio to 2 here, and it will take up half of this half of this row rather than a third of it. So if we need more space, we can go ahead and modify that. We can also modify our fields to behave a little differently. So in this case, our description field here is shown up as a field type of text. If I want this to be a little bigger, I can go ahead and make it a text area for those longer descriptions of part items. We could also add some drop-down lists as well. In this case, our make-by decision. Columns. We can go ahead and add make-by. Part is current. I think we have a good amount of metadata on our form. Part. And voila, we have a brand new part form created within only a few minutes. So like I mentioned, the responsive form designer only has, well, since it's relatively new, it doesn't have the full functionality that the classic form designer may have, such as X-class, X-properties, things of that nature. But for those of you who are new to being Aras administrators, this is a really good option to create quick forms that all they really need to do is show metadata. And with that, I think we're good to open it up for questions.
Great, thanks, Milan. That was a good presentation. Hold on, my printer's printing. My apologies. There we go. Now I can hear. Anyone have any questions? Please put the questions in the questions panel, and we will respond. And we do have one here. Question is, can a classic form and responsive form exist for an item? If so, how does Aras determine which one is rendered?
Yeah, so since the forms are stored under the same item, it could be a bit confusing. So really, Aras determines what form is active based off of, kind of similar to a previous form definition. So say I wanted a form for components versus assemblies, and say that class structure, I would assign my classic form to a specific classification. I would apply my responsive form to a different one. So really it's kind of determined based off how Aras would pick any form previously. So it's still defined the same. It's just the data model is a bit different, as say a responsive form would be stored under one form and a classic form would be stored under another one. So yeah, so really the Aras platform just decides which one to render based off of, say, that classification.
Great. All right, awesome. We got a question in from Bob. Where are events added to form controls?
So within the responsive designer, so you're saying if you wanted to add an event to, say, this checkbox. So within the responsive designer, I don't believe we have events to these fields yet. I'll have to go ahead and double check, but there's a good chance that the events can also be directly driven by the previous definition. I'll have to go back and double check that within the documentation for sure, though.
Okay, we got one from Dennis. Are there allowances for client events?
That kind of, I guess, lines up with the previous one.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's stuff that will be added in the future. This is kind of a initial release of the designer, and they'll be looking to kind of expand that definition in the future.
I got another one here. If I modify the content on either form, will it modify the other version?
Oh, yeah. So that's between, say, a classic form and a responsive form. So in the case of, no. So I don't know. So essentially, I had a classic form for this part item. before I open up the responsive form designer, or when I did open up the responsive form designer, it was completely blank. That's just because existing properties on a form don't transfer between responsive or classic. You'll have to go ahead and recreate that form, depending on what version you're using.
Okay. Another one from Dennis. If you have a responsive form created, can you switch back to the classic form?
Yeah, so I will say for this demo, I didn't do a great job of kind of representing the best way to apply responsive forms to an item. So the suggested way within the documentation to really apply a responsive form is to create a whole new form item and attach that to the item type, and then have that responsive form be, I guess, activated by a specific classification. So if in this case, since I have a responsive form and a classic form within the same form item, that's presently driven, well, what I've seen so far behavior-wise is that no matter which form I have present within the form item, the part item will tend to favor the responsive form. So ideally, you'll want to store them separately, not on the same item, but just for the sake of demonstration, I kind of built it within the same item.
Okay, great. One last question here. Will the new Aras reporting options replace other options like self-service or XSLT reports?
So yeah, this is actually something I was curious about myself as well. So the new reporting options seem like a good replacement for something like self-service reporting. However, if you're currently using self-service reporting, there shouldn't be any worries there. There's no plans to sunset or get rid of self-service reports. This is really just another option to generate some new and interactive reports within Aras. So if that's a worry that you're going to have to change your ways, rest easy, you won't for the time being. So there's no plans to sunset self-service. There's no plans to sunset the XSLT reporting functionality. So really, like I mentioned, just another tool to expose information within Aras.
Okay, great. All right, pretty much wraps up our questions. Anyone else have a question? Please enter it in the panel. I'm not seeing anything.
All right. With that, I'll just move to our wrap up really quickly. So our next Tech Tuesday will be covering release 29, and that's slated to be in December of 2023. And they're targeting more improvements to the reporting and dashboards functionality, as well as the responsive form designer. And also, for those of you that are Aras or Razorleaf subscribers, we're having our user group conference in Grand Rapids, Michigan, on October 2nd and 3rd. And that will be at the same location as last year if you attended, and that'll be in downtown Grand Rapids. So, Julian, I don't know if you have anything else to add related to that.
Nope, I was going to mention the user group, so that was great. And we'll provide a date on the December event as soon as we have more details from the Aras team about when that release is going to be out. Very good. Well, thanks, Milan, for your time and for showing us a great demo. And thanks for the questions, everybody. We will be posting this online shortly. And we thank you and have a good afternoon.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Milan. Bye.